Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Ken Khachigian, author and chief speechwriter to President Ronald Reagan. Ken, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Brittany. Good to be here.
Good to have you. And in less than 2 weeks, Vice President Kamala Harris on January 20th will officially be out of a job. And you penned an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal discussing her next steps, seeing what is potentially in store for her, both politically and not. And the op-ed was entitled this: Will the Vice President run for California governor? So first, to start off the conversation, what do you think?
Well, I think she's got several options. What I said in the op-ed was when she leaves office, she's going to have it's going to be a shock treatment for Kamala Harris. For the last 21 years, she's had a variety of protections. She's been DA, she's been Attorney General, she's been Vice President, and for at least 17 and a half of those 21 years, she's had security protection. She's had drivers, she's had chauffeur drivers. As Vice President, she flew around on Air Force Two, which is a extended 757, Boeing 757. She's been coddled by staff. She's had somebody driving her around. So it's going to be a whole different life. Her Secret Service protection ends on July 20th of next year. So on that date, she's going to be just like the rest of us. She's going to have to pump her own gas, drive herself around, and so she's going to have to decide what to do with her career, with her life. And she has several options, obviously. She was a lawyer. Her license, I checked her out, her law license is inactive. She can activate that very easily. So she can become a lawyer again. And there are several great law firms in California, and she can join one of those law firms and become sort of a fake law practice. They'll parade her around, and she can make a couple of $1 million a year doing that. And then she can sit on boards of directors, probably 6 or 7 boards, make a lot of money, and be the face of that. That's one option. And they can take very good care of her. Any of those options, they'll provide a car and driver, and she can have a comfortable life. The second option is to renew the option of running for president again in 2028, in which case she can have one of those jobs and sit on the boards and start reactivating her presidential ambitions and start thinking about running again. The third option is the one I reviewed in that op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which is to run for governor of California. And that one, she'll have to make a decision probably here in the next 6 months, 6 or 7 months, because there are already about 6 or 7 or 8 active candidates running for that office, and they've I think 4 or 5 of them have already declared, and they've set up active campaigns. So if she wants to be a viable candidate, she has to get in. Now, she's already the potential leading candidate because 72% of Californians said they would be likely or very likely to support her candidacy for governor.
Let's talk about that first, because a lot of people there, as you said in that poll, said that they would support her for governor. What is her standing in California politics as of right now?
Well, I think she has a lot of weight to carry, obviously. Those polls, Brittany, I ran, among the other things I did, everybody thinks I was just a speechwriter, but I ran campaigns in California. I ran Governor Duke Majan's campaign for governor of California. I helped Pete Wilson's campaign for governor. I ran Bob Dole's campaign for president when he was running for president here in California in 1996. So I have a lot of experience running campaigns in California. And so the reason she's has that such high popularity as a candidate for governor is just pure name ID. She has more name ID than all the other candidates. And name ID in California is like platinum. It's better than gold. And so she has name ID that no other candidate has. The other candidates are like wallpaper, frankly. People don't know who they are. But she also, along with that name ID, she bears a lot of burdens, and she bears the burden that she carried from the Biden administration of a failed presidency towards the very end, of high inflation, of weak foreign and defense policy, of high crime, border insecurity, and now, of course, sadly, what's going on here in Southern California with these fires and the disaster that's taking place.
I want to talk about that. Let's dive a little deeper there, because she carries the Biden administration burden. He's a deeply unpopular president as of right now, and part of the reason why she lost is because she was unable to separate herself from President Biden. Then you have what's happening right now in California, where Governor Gavin Newsom and his policies are being pilloried on the national stage. Will she carry that weight as well?
Oh, very much so. She will bring into California all the burdens that any Democrat carries right now, because what's happening in California now is a Democrat disaster, because the Democrats have held power in California now for the last generation, and all the policies that are taking place, environmental policies that have created the disaster that were taking place, where no water has been going into Southern California, fire hydrants that didn't produce water, water policies that have gone to fish instead of to reservoirs. These are all because of California's been controlled by not only Democratic governors, but a Democratic legislature. And so that burden is carried. But there's another one I mentioned in that Wall Street Journal article, Brittany, and that is, even if she runs, there's another serious question she has to face. Not only will she be asked, Ms. Harris, are you running just to run for president again in 2028? But we want to know, what did you know about President Biden's mental incapacity during the time you were vice president? When you were in the Situation Room with him during those times of potential international crisis, did you see any cognitive disability on behalf of the president? Or were you uncertain with him carrying the nuclear football? What did you know when the press secretary is up there saying that the president had all those mental capabilities about him, when the majority leader Chuck Schumer saying and Nancy Pelosi were saying that he had all his mental skills about him? Did you lie to the American public when you said that the president had all his wits about him? So she'll be asked those kinds of questions, and that's a big burden to carry. So maybe the best thing for Kamala Harris to do is to just put her political ambitions aside and just have a prosperous future in front of her as a lawyer, a public speaker, a member of foundations and boards.
You also wrote in that Wall Street Journal op-ed that she faces a similar set of circumstances to Richard Nixon when he lost the 1960 presidential election. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, and what mistakes could she avoid if she's a student of history? If she's looking at Nixon, he didn't win, so what can she do to avoid his path?
Yes, Brittany, I spoke about that from my own relationship with President Nixon. I worked with him on his memoirs. And that's why I cited his memoirs in my op-ed article. I sat across from him back in 1975, 1976, and 77 when we were working on his memoirs. And he talked to me directly about this. And I helped work on that chapter in his book when he talked about coming back from defeat in 1960 after losing to Kennedy in that election, and deciding whether or not to run for governor in California. So he and I spoke directly about that, and when he wrote about it in his book. And so he was faced with that decision, and so he really didn't have the fire in his belly. And he talked to me about that as he wrote in his memoirs, and he said, I just didn't have the real desire to be governor, did I? And I don't, and when I ran, people were just pressing on me to run, but the fact is, at the end of the day, people thought I wanted to do as a stepping stone to run for president in 1964, even though that's not what I really had in mind. But the real question is, I really didn't, in my mind, want to be governor of California, and I didn't face that question. And he sat directly across from me here in La Casa Pacifica in San Clemente as we worked on his memoirs, and I write about a lot of that in my book that I just published. That we worked on it together. And so he felt that way. So she's going to have to make that kind of decision. If she ran for governor, in her gut, does she really want to be governor? Does she want to lead California, or does she want to act like a leader who wants to run for president?
And would it be impossible to shake that perception, do you think, for her, if she runs for governor, that people think, no, she's really here to lead California, this is the end goal for her? Or will people think, hey, she ran for president twice, do you think that she's using this just as a stepping stone?
I think clearly they'll see her using it as a stepping stone for a run for president of the United States in 2028. I think they'll see her feeling that I think she thinks she came pretty close to winning the presidency this last time around, that it wasn't that big of a defeat for her, that she had her chances, that she could have done better. Maybe she'd run a better campaign if she had a better campaign staff, if she hadn't, I think she really believes in her gut that she bore a lot of burdens from Joseph Biden. And there's no question about that. And I think she feels in her own mind that if she can run a campaign without carrying Biden on her back, without bearing the burden of Biden, that she could win the presidency. And so if she was governor and did a fairly decent job as governor of California and solved some of the problems, and I think in her heart she probably thinks she'd be a very much better governor than Gavin Newsom, and that if she did a half-decent job as governor and then traveled the country and not only as governor and then raised some money for other candidates, that she could be president in 2028. But that would be a detriment, be viewed by the voters, that she would be much too ambitious, and that would be a burden for her.
Ken, in our conversation, it essentially has lined up like a pros and cons list. So pro for running for governor, as you said, she has that name recognition, which is platinum in California. Some cons is especially with those devastating, horrific wildfires raging through Southern California right now, there are a lot of people, including Democrats, especially in the area, who are pointing the finger at Democrat policies. Gavin Newsom, LA Mayor Karen Bass. Democrats are having a tough time right now in California. She also can't divorce herself from President Biden, his potential legacy, his unpopular presidency, and people could see this as a stepping stone for, hey, I'm just using this position to get to the higher rung of the ladder. What do you think, in your opinion, is her biggest hurdle to overcome? Plus the questions about what she knew about President Biden's mental acuity.
All of those, everything you just said, are those horrible burdens. If she knocked on my door right now and came in and sat down with me and said, I know you're on the other side of the aisle, Ken, but I know you've got a lot of experience. You've got over 40 years of experience in California politics, and you know your way around here. What would you advise me? And I'd say, Miss Harris, you've had a good career. You've done really well for yourself. You've probably done a lot better than anybody expected you ever would do. Why don't you enjoy your life now, have a good law practice, make some money, go spend some time on Steven Spielberg's yacht, and have some fun with the Hollywood set, sit on some boards, write a good book, do some international travel, set up a foundation and do some good, maybe change some life for some underprivileged children. And I think you could change the world that way, but I don't think you have a future in politics.
Well, to your point then, what do you think her legacy would be? Because yesterday was a very interesting moment. We saw past vice presidents and presidents all together gathered at Jimmy Carter's funeral, and it seems that the American public has some rose-colored glasses when we're looking at presidents and their legacies. Yesterday, an image and video went viral of President George W. Bush tapping President Obama in the belly. When he left the office, he was deeply unpopular with the war and the recession. So what do you think maybe in a year from now, maybe 5 years from now, in the future, how will history books remember Vice President Kamala Harris?
Oh, I think she'll be a sort of a forgotten footnote. I think she will have been seen as being very fortunate to have held that position. She got there. She was appointed, Biden put her in that position because she was a black woman, and she was there because of her. She filled the position for a slot for him, and that she was fortunate. When she ran for president, she didn't do very well, Brittany. So she was lucky to get where she is, and I don't think she'll be a sort of a forgotten. I'd say 15, 20 years from now, she'll be a totally forgotten footnote in history as a vice president, and I don't think she'll have much of a reputation whatsoever. I know that seems harsh and cruel to say that, but she didn't make much of an impression as vice president. She didn't have much of a portfolio. The portfolio she had about overseeing the border, she didn't do much about. She didn't make much of an impression doing international travel, and when she was on television, she didn't make much of an impression. She couldn't communicate very well. She had that terrible cackle, or whatever you call it. I don't know how you describe it. It's when she talked and when she laughed, she had these word salads. So she wasn't really up to the job. She just didn't have the qualifications, really, I don't think. So I think she's going to be viewed probably in the lower percentile, maybe 10, 15 percentile of vice presidents who ever served that office.
Critics would push back on that, saying she had an extensive law career. She served in the Senate. What would you say to that?
Well, again, she in the slipstream of history, when you look at it, she got her jobs not through a lot of hard work or stress and strain. Willie Brown sort of anointed her in the city attorney jobs, and then she won the attorney general office just by less than 1% of the vote, mainly because her opponent in that race made a mistake in the final debate. She just sort of slipped through, and then again in the Senate race, she because she was a Democrat in a Democrat state, got elected Democrat, and then she had some impressive performances in the Senate where she berated some witnesses. But then when she had to do things on her own, where she had to perform on her own and make her way in the national political scene, running for president in 2020, she didn't do well at all. She failed, couldn't even make it to the first primary. So you see, she didn't. Her political performances were not that great, Brittany. So I don't think her record was all that sterling. You have to measure her by the opportunity she had to perform when she didn't have a lot of sponsorship. But when every time she had any career movement, it was generally because she had a sponsor. Early on, it was Willie Brown, and then later on, it was Joe Biden. But after that, I can't give her much credit for doing things on her own.
Well, Ken, I appreciate your op-ed and the conversation today. And within the next few weeks, we will definitely keep our eye out on where Vice President Kamala Harris's next career move is. Thank you so much for joining me.
We'll see if my predictions come true. Who knows? maybe she will knock on my door.